Everything that drives change in the organization happens on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes with everyone's lives and trying to grow a successful business, it's incredibly hard to even find the time on a month-to-month basis to run these reports reactively. So taking that proactive approach and making sure that on a day-to-day, you have it instilled in everything that you do and everything that your staff do that will drive performance in the organization can be the best decision that you make today.
Welcome to episode 246 of the industry's leading business podcast for fitness owners and managers. This episode is brought to you by our podcast partner, OneFitStop. OneFitStop provides scheduling, client management, programming, and payment collection tools that will set your business up for success. To find out more, go to onefitstop.com or click on the link in today's show notes. Welcome everyone to a very special episode of the Fitness Business Podcast. As club owners and managers, you no doubt have access to a huge array of data and reports for your business. But the question is, are you using that information to your full advantage? Well, today's guest is an expert in this area, and he's going to help us understand how you can best tap into your data to use it to grow your fitness business. Today's guest is the founder of OneFitStop, Jarron Aizen. Jarron is an entrepreneur who is immersed in the health and fitness industry, and he has a passion to leverage technology to create efficiencies and experiences. Now, all of our regular listeners will know OneFitStop, as they've been an important part of the FBP family for many years now. But for anyone who's not familiar with the business, OneFitStop is a SaaS software that streamlines core business management tools and member experiences into one complete platform specifically for the fitness industry. Now, during this episode of the show, Jarron talks us through 3 of the most important reports that a fitness owner or manager should run for their business. We discuss how frequently you should look at the data, what key metrics to look out for, how this data can impact your business, and he leaves us with some key actions and tasks to implement based on that knowledge. I love chatting to Jarron about this topic, and I really suggest that you listen to this one ready to write notes because there's lots of takeaways coming your way today. So without further ado, enjoy my interview with Jarron Aizen from OneFitStop. Hey Jarron, welcome back to the show. It's so great to have you on again.
Chantel, it's a pleasure to be back.
So today we're going to be talking about using data insights to grow your fitness business. So to get things started today, can you take us through 3 of the most important reports that a fitness owner or manager should run for their business?
Definitely. And I think to really identify why some of these reports are important to run and action in the fitness business, we have to truly understand some of the driving forces that I believe are some really nice high-level categories that are impactful across the organization. And then we can correlate these reports back to understand why we choose them, and then some granular actionable tasks that can be set in the organization to achieve the outcome and result that we're seeking. So the first is brand and awareness. This is the top of funnel lead generation and nurture. And this is how we position your organization to ultimately drive referrals, stay at the tip of everyone's tongue, and make sure that this awareness assists in the nurture campaigns that you run and what will be their first experience on site. Which leads to point number 2, which is your in-club, and I like to also consider this out-club, experience. And that includes their first on-site experience. I call that the FO. And that also includes how you intertwine staff and instructors and the experience they can create into the programming that is delivered, and finally the technology components that can also bolster up the experience. And the third point here, the third driving force, is how do we manage and be active in our retention management? And I think when we're looking at different KPIs and reports, of course, there are certain reports that should be running daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly. And each one has a different impact to the organization. But the way I like to think about it is that the most impactful reports that you can run are the ones that can create granular daily tasks for your staff and team to action that ultimately drive the results of these monthly reports and quarterly reports. And if you don't catch certain elements early enough in their cycles, what will happen is that you're just constantly playing this reactive game, and you're never going to truly enforce change in the organization. So in saying that, the key metrics that I wanted to highlight today are the following. The first is identifying new clients with bookings, okay, that have actually, or first attendance, depending if you're a big box or if you're a boutique. Now, this is really important because this is going to tie in later on as we talk about the impact to a business in the brand and the awareness that comes together with that first experience that they have. So ultimately, we want to welcome them to the facility, or at least know that it is their first time when they do come into that first class or when they walk in for the very first time, because we want to meet their expectations that you set with your brand and awareness that you have and how they've ultimately come to know of the facility and trial it with a friendly greeting and or a special welcome pack or other nurture items that you can create or offers and the environment that you can create that will assist in then making sure that they are a long-term customer, and we're increasing our average lifetime value for every customer, which then is a monthly report that you can run. But that is the first one, new clients with bookings or attendance, identifying their first visits and making sure that they feel incredibly welcome in the organization.
Okay, so that's report number one. And I'm going to jump in quickly and just say, for those of you that are really interested in focusing on this area or that area that Jarron just mentioned, if you didn't catch it, we actually did a great episode featuring Elias Scar where we talked about onboarding new customers, and that was from that touch point perspective. Jarron, you just mentioned the welcome pack and having some type of a tangible item that you might give to them. So if people are interested in exploring that side of things, I'll pop a link in today's show notes so you can have a listen back to that episode. So new clients with bookings is number one. What's number two, Jarron?
So number two, I've kind of got two different reports here that they correlate with each other, but ultimately achieve the same outcome. What we're essentially looking for is abandoned cart. So prospective members or clients that have created an account, if you offer online account creation, but have abandoned their cart. They haven't purchased a pack or membership. They haven't made their first booking, and they've shown some interest. They've given you some basic details, but they haven't followed through. And that also correlates with another report that you can think about running, which is making sure that you identify those that may have purchased their welcome offer, their introductory offer, but they have not yet either turned up to the facility or made their first booking. And both of these segments here, ideally, you want to make sure at the very least you have their email address and phone number. And I would highly recommend, not necessarily the first time when you're outreaching to that particular segment on a day-to-day basis, going straight for that email. That's the easy way out at this point. You want to get on the phone and you want to be personable and you want to stay really, really front of mind, because they're in the mode of making not necessarily a buying decision, but they're making a decision to come and experience your facility, which then leads to making that ultimate buying decision.
That's such an important point that you just mentioned, Jarron, is that just being proactive and getting on the phone, because I am the first one to admit that I'm guilty of abandoning my cart when I'm online shopping all the time. And you know that as a consumer, most of the time, the only reaction you get from that store or that facility is that you get that automated email. But I love that proactive approach of jumping on the phone and actually talking to that prospect or that person, even as you say, that's made the purchase but not yet come into our facility or taken advantage of their booking. So can I just circle back to something, because I know that you touched on this at the very beginning, but with each of those reports, how frequently, can you remind us, should we be looking at that data?
So the most important thing with these reports that I'm mentioning right now is that you shouldn't go more than 2 days without running and taking in the latest bunch of clients or potential customers that fit the build here in these categories. The biggest thing here is that and when I get to the third report, you'll see why as well. But the longer you let it lapse here, the more out of mind your facility is in their awareness, in their buying decisions, and then it becomes much harder to reestablish the relationship. So these reports, and why I'm sort of pulling them out individually here rather than others, and there's so many reports that we can run to drive the business. These ones can create daily granular tasks for you to then allocate to the staff members that drive the day-to-day of the business.
Okay, Jarron, so now tell us, what's the third report?
The third report, Chantel, is absent clients. In particular, I mean, you can run this for different date ranges or periods. I like to set it as a standard that if they haven't been to the facility in about 14 days, checked in, or their attendance marked in 14 days, then it's really time to action and get on the phone or email them to make sure that, again, it's front of mind that they're going to come back into the facility and they're going to plan the next session. And they just need a little bit of a nudge in the right direction, because the longer you leave that particular one, the harder it becomes for them to stay associated with the business. And you're going to naturally, when you run retention reports on a weekly or monthly basis, you're going to see a lot worse results on that side if you're not staying active with who is absent in the organization.
That makes complete sense, Jarron. So now that we have a better understanding of those three important reports that a fitness owner or manager should run for their business, can we just work our way through and break them down in a little bit more detail? So starting off with having a look at what the key metrics are that we should be looking at for that first report, new clients with bookings.
Definitely. So as I mentioned, tying it back into some of these driving forces, the new clients with bookings is all about representing your brand really well in the marketplace. They've likely come across your facility via word of mouth. They've seen some banners, they've driven past it, or a Facebook or social media advertisement. But overall, you're trying to purport an image to them that says, come and experience what we can create. And so ultimately, when you're looking at some of the metrics here, it's all about capitalizing on that brand engagement and making them feel incredibly welcome. So honestly, most of these reports is simply a dump of data. It's not an analysis of a statistic, but it's a dump of data of the actionable tasks that you should be outreaching or calling specific clientele on that day-to-day basis. And then when I talk about in just a little bit about what then you can run on the weekly basis to then measure the impact of these daily granular tasks to the organization, different metrics then correlate to what impact these tasks can make. So the impact that it can make, ultimately, the first thing that you would need to do is identify, and I'm going to suggest a couple of these reports that can be run on a weekly or monthly basis, but you want to be sure to identify the KPIs that you wish to hit on some of these reports, and I'll go through them in a little bit more detail. But overall, my biggest recommendation is whoever is responsible for hitting these daily tasks that you allocate, don't start to measure their productivity of how many calls they're making or how many tasks they're completing or how many emails they're sending. It's not about that. Ultimately, if you give them the KPIs associated with correlated reports that you know that if they're hitting these three tasks on a daily basis, then ultimately our numbers are going to look much better in other areas, then their goal is not, they don't see their goal as completing a single call. They see their goal as a more of a holistic impact approach to the entire group. Mm. And then you can start to look at these reports on a weekly basis that really make an impact to the business. I would recommend that on a weekly basis, at a bare minimum, you're going to look at a few key stats, and then you can start to take action directly in the organization and how that impacts everything. So the first is looking at ultimately new intake of clients or members in the organization. And I like to look at these both as a total count, so a number of how many have joined versus the actual dollar value that they are bringing in. And that also correlates to how well your staff on the ground are actually selling a high value membership, thus increasing the average transaction value and average lifetime value for these members as well. Looking at the count and volume for new member intake, the cancellations as well. So how many people are leaving? And then if you are a membership-based business, looking at how many people are coming onto suspensions and how many people are ending suspensions or time holds, because that does impact your net weekly revenue. And that comes out with a very basic number, but ultimately it's net impact for the week, new cancellations and suspensions. And immediately that will identify red flags of weeks that you have, really good spells. And you can go back, and I would definitely recommend to correlate all the new sales and cancellations. If there is a particular person that's responsible for ringing up those sales or calling or making that final impact, then I would definitely start to measure their performance against week on week of new business that they bring in and new business that they retain as well in the organization. And the other key stats that I would definitely look at, which is all about ensuring a higher retention rate, is the membership usage, or in more simple terms, the average check-ins in the organization. And I would measure this and I would break it down in two areas: average check-ins for new clients and average check-ins for existing clients. And ultimately, if we talked about those reports to get people into the organization and welcome them on for their first visit, and drive as many classes or as many sessions that they can do in their very first week or 2 weeks. That's going to impact your average check-in for new clients. And in their very first week or 2 weeks, if it's under an average of 2 a week for new clients, in my eyes, that's a red flag. They should definitely be experiencing that facility as many times as possible in the first 2 weeks that they're on an intro offer or on their first membership. Looking at the average check-ins for existing clients, that also that statistic has a big correlation to then how active your staff are engaging with those absent clients. Because if we got a sleeper database, your average check-ins for existing clients is going to be really, really low. And again, you would expect that metric for existing client check-in to be lower than the new client check-in. However, it may not be at times. If you've got a really active database, which every facility aims to have, then ultimately they may be very similar and correlated between the new client average check-ins and existing average client check-ins.
Okay, Jarron, so we've had a look at some key actions that we should implement. Is there anything else that we should think about?
Well, I'm a really big fan of daily team stand-ups. I find that being vocal in a more public setting among staff gives a forum to understand and discuss metrics and all other considerations that the staff need to be taking on a daily basis to drive that organizational change. And honestly, having an open floor entices an environment for suggestions, concerns, and feedback that allows a manager, honestly, to both be directive when they're giving instructions on what they need to be doing on a day-to-day and giving them that guidance, but also becoming a very good active listener and then taking it all in and implementing the change that's important to the organization.
Hi everyone, today Jarron has stepped us through some great detail around these 3 weekly reports. But just as a bonus and a quick cross-check for everyone that's listening today, I asked him to quickly run us through which monthly reports he suggests that we should be running. Here's what he had to say.
Definitely. And look, there are so many different reports that you may deem really critical for your success. I'm going to run you through just a couple here, obviously just naming them, but I would highly recommend, if you don't run these on a month-to-month basis, that you should definitely start gathering the data for some of these reports. So they are the conversion rate of new members into the facility, average class attendance, revenue per session, revenue per client, revenue per square foot, and also client retention rate.
To finish off today, are there any closing messages that you would leave with the FBP family?
Definitely. Look, I think for the success of everyone's business that does tune in here and listen on a weekly basis, I would recommend taking the most proactive approach that you can. Everything that drives change in the organization happens on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes with everyone's lives and trying to grow a successful business, it's incredibly hard to even find the time on a month-to-month basis to run these reports reactively. So taking that proactive approach and making sure that on a day-to-day, you have it instilled in everything that you do and everything that your staff do that will drive performance in the organization can be the best decision that you make today.
That's great advice to finish up on. And I want to thank you for taking the time to run us through that detail of each of those reports. And I think that it's a really important reminder for everyone, regardless of how thorough you feel as though your systems are currently, take this opportunity to go back and cross-check what you're doing. Have a listen to that detail that Jarron stepped us through in regards to the key metrics, the impact that it has on the business, and in particular, the actions or tasks that we should implement based on the knowledge that we gain from those key metrics. And I think that it will absolutely benefit all of us within our fitness business. So Jarron, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show today.
Thanks, Chantel, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you again to Jarron for such a detailed and informative interview today. A reminder that One Fit Stop provides scheduling, client management, programming and payment collection tools that will set your business up for success. To find out more, go to onefitstop.com or click on the link in today's show notes. And before we finish off today, a quick reminder that all the resources, the links for today's show can be found at fitnessbusinesspodcast.com. A big thank you to our foundation partner, Active Management. And don't forget, as a listener of the show, you have the opportunity to work with JT, which means you can get one free session when you buy one coaching session. No matter where you are in the world, technology allows him to work with you. Just go to activemgmt.com.au/FBP family to work with JT to get more people moving and moving more often. That's one free session when you buy one coaching session. Just go to activemgmt.com.au/FBP family. Thank you so much for joining me for this special episode of the Fitness Business Podcast. And remember, what you leave behind is not what's engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others.